This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 3, Episode 251 of Jumblethink.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Jumblethink, where we interview amazing entrepreneurs about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Zack Curry, Executive Pastor at Jesus Culture. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, it's time to subscribe to Jumblethink, and here's how you can do it. If you're a big fan of Apple Podcasts, simply go to jumblethink.com/iTunes, and for Spotify, jumblethink.com/Spotify. Take you right to the app, right to where you can subscribe. Now let's jump into today's show. Hey there, welcome to Jumblethink. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a great show lined up for you today. Before we get rolling, we want to thank our friends over at Penji and at opportunityinchina.com for sponsoring today's show. Penji is your unlimited graphic design at a low monthly rate. Use the code JUMBLE when you go to Penji, PENJI.com to get 15% off your first month. And opportunityinchina.com can connect you with both learning and teaching experiences abroad. Check them out at opportunityinchina.com. On today's Jumblethink show, our guest is Zack Curry. Super excited to have him on. I've known Zack for a while, and Zack is the executive pastor at Jesus Culture. What's Jesus Culture? Well, Jesus Culture started out as a youth group. Then they started doing conferences, launched a live worship album. From there, they started a record label and a global youth movement. A few years ago, they started a church in Sacramento, California called Jesus Culture Church, and they are doing amazing things. Zack recently launched a very cool new podcast called the Man Camp Podcast, talking about men and faith and finding your purpose and destiny, really stepping into identity. It is a super awesome podcast. They have a couple shows out now. You should go check that out. You can find those links, of course, at jumblethink.com in the episode notes. So let's go ahead and join our conversation with Zack Curry. We are here with Zack Curry. He is the executive pastor over at Jesus Culture. I've known Zack, I was trying to figure this out, I think 15 years back when you were working at Campus Wave, first met you, and bumped in and out of contact with Zack for years. It's been a while since we last chatted, but it's good to have you on the show.
Thanks, Mike. It's really, do you go by, I'm used to calling you Mike, Michael.
I go by whatever people happen to call me.
Okay. It's really great to connect with you again. It's an honor to be on the podcast, and we go way back. So yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, back to the Chico days. Chico's such a special community for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Born and raised. We're in Sacramento, California now, but got the strong NorCal roots going on.
Yeah, I kind of consider California my second home. I grew up in the Northeast, but sometimes Northern California feels more like home, and I miss the food, I miss the culture, I definitely miss the people. So, yeah, cool place. And it was great because I got to meet people like you and a bunch of other people we commonly know together, and excited to have you on the show and talk a lot about faith, talk about Jesus Culture, talk about the new podcast you're doing, and see where the conversation goes. So before we kick off, we have a lot of faith-based people that listen to the show. We have a lot of non-faith-based people who listen to the show. Tell us a little bit about Jesus Culture and how you got involved with Jesus Culture.
So Jesus Culture is an organization. We started off out of a youth group, but it grew into more of a conference organization that did events, a music label that we started from the music that came out of that. But recently, in the last 5 years, we relocated from Redding, California to Sacramento and launched a church while continuing to do what we would call more the movement side, which is events, tours, conferences, and then music. So we have several artists and record live studio. It's in the more Christian worship space, but we've been around 20 years, believe it or not.
Crazy.
And I've been on staff for 8 years at Jesus Culture, but I've known Banning Leapshire, who's the founder of Jesus Culture, for over 22 years. So since or before Jesus Culture started. And so I've joined the team, and we're located in Sacramento, California, based out of here, and then do stuff all over the country and world, as well as a local church expression.
Yeah, for sure. I can remember meeting Banning back when I was youth pastoring in Oroville, California at the Father's House, and it's incredible to see this journey. Tell us a little bit about how you guys are moving from, it's kind of a weird thing because it has been an evolution of creating culture.
Yeah.
How do you guys decide the direction? Because there's so much going on at the church. There's so much going on at the record label and at the conferences. So how are you guys really creating movement and culture in what you do?
I mean, we've had a 20-year journey. I would say in the early part of that, it was intentional, but on the culture side, there wasn't a plan for let's start a music label, let's start a huge conference or whatever. It kind of happened out of momentum, out of vision, and the culture followed. The values or the things we were going after definitely grew, probably beyond we had expected, in the sense of didn't know that, one of the first songs that kind of put the music side of Jesus culture on the grid kind of was by accident. It went viral on YouTube with kind of a makeshift recording that we had done. And so that, while the goal was to impact young people, the goal was to see, for us, we wanted people to encounter God. Like, that was hands down big dreams, big vision. But the way that it came about was surprising and less created, and it's not like here's the plan laid out. Over time, momentum built. There's a lot of strategy and culture, and so in the later years, I would say, with specifically the church, it was a lot more intentional, because we already had a culture. We had not just a brand, but some real strong values that we had cultivated, guarded, developed. Some by accident, and then some along the way very intentionally. And so it's kind of funny, because when you talk about culture, such a key thing in any space, whether it's the faith world, business, I mean, anywhere, government, culture is a big deal.
Yeah.
Which, it drills down into practices, values, beliefs that you govern yourself by, that you intentionally go after, or if you intentionally don't go after, you're still going to have culture. It just may not be what you wanted or intended.
Yeah.
And so we had in the later years, as we started the church, it was really fun because we'd been around for a while. We said, okay, here are some really non-negotiables, values, things that we would die on the hill for.
Yeah.
And started backwards, because in the church world, it wasn't a typical church plant, because we had a bit of a following and name. And so when we opened the doors, it wasn't a gradual build. It was just big.
Yeah.
And so for us, it was really relevant or imperative for us that there was strong cultures that would influence those that were coming in, or the opposite would be that we would be influenced, and the culture that we were hoping to build and create would not happen. And so we use the analogy a lot of, if you build a skyscraper, if you're building culture, before you build up, you have to actually build down.
Yeah.
You have to go down several stories to have the foundation to be able to sustain and hold what you're building up. And we go back to that a lot, especially when we talk about culture. It's like, hey, we're going to go deep and, put the work in to ask the hard questions, to be intentional and say, who are we? What are our values? What are we going after? What is the culture that we are creating? Because culture is created.
Yeah.
Sometimes intentionally, like that's the ideal, and sometimes unintentionally. Either way, you're going to get it. And so it was fun in the later years. This is a long answer to your question, but it started off as vision, let's go for it. There was a need. It started off in a very small space of Northern California, and let's gather some youth together. I think there was 300, spreading, from the first time in the first conference in 1999 to, a gathering in 2011 with 14,000 in Chicago. there was quite a journey there, but the same vision, the same goal, which is, I think, a lot like a business idea. You're trying to solve a need, or you're providing a service, or you're as an author or an artist, you're creating something that is filling a space, meeting a need. But then out of that, there's this journey of growth. Everyone wants to grow. And often I think culture, it's not the only piece, but definitely is one of those. If you don't have that, or you haven't really done the work on that end, then we've used this phrase before, we're drowning in our dreams.
Wow.
Because if you stick with it and you go after something, you work hard. I mean, there's things that are out of our control, but there are things that are in control. At some point, what happens if you get the dream or the outcome or the goal? Are you ready? Does your structure, does your culture, what are you going to do when it happens?
Yeah.
And I think some of us, we haven't gotten that far. We talk about, I want to see this dream happen. This is my vision. And then we may not have answered what happens if it comes.
If it happens,
we all want to, we all want to grow. And then with growth comes growing pains with, whether it's revenue, whether it's your audience, fill in the blank. Many times, if we're not ready, we can drown in our own success. And that's why you see a lot of businesses or any space not last, because culture, among other things, is not established strong.
Well, and I remember back when I was at Brownsville at the School of Ministry there, they would always say, it's your talents that take you to the top, but it's your character that keeps it there. And I would say part of character is understanding that culture, the ethos that you're creating around you. I find it fascinating because you mentioned earlier that Jesus culture started out of Bethel, then had the conferences and the music exploded. It would have been easy for Banning and for the music portion to just step out and say, hey, we're going to create a brand, a business around this, and we're going to market to churches. And I know it's intentional, but why is it important to Banning, to Jesus culture, to be rooted in the local church? Because we see so many musicians from the church that kind of go, I'm going to go do this on my own. I'm going to go sell 1 billion albums or whatever it is. And they just kind of say, hey, I'm going to have my own ship in the water and I'm going to go do this. But Jesus culture has always been rooted in local church. Why has that continued to be part of that culture that you're building?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of reasons. Some of the main ones at the time, the music industry was very different than it is now.
Yeah.
And just so you know, the goal was never, let's sell albums. Let's create a label. What actually started out was we want to see young people impacted, encounter God.
Yeah.
It just happened that music was one of the things that caught. But Banning, especially as a leader, it was never just about music, although music was music travels further, impacts people significantly, has a lasting impact. But Banning, the context was it started out of community. It started in a local church community. The team, the people, it wasn't just, hey, let's find the most talented people. There had been history before that.
Yeah.
And so that context is important, at least for us, because that's part of our fabric and DNA. That's how things started. And honestly, it's how things sustain. Because at the time, especially in the music industry, you would see a lot of artists or musicians just get burned out because the model, this is a generalization, but the model was you tour so many dates, you sign a record label, or you sign a deal with so many albums that come out, and in many cases, that would burn out relationships or marriages or families. And you saw a lot of that. And so we actually created our own label so that we could guard that value.
Yeah.
And so for us, the local church is not just an institution. It's a community. It's a place of strength. It's a place of it's what we're doing things out of. And so, moving forward 20 years later, even part of the reason that we planted a church was at the time, we out of Reading, we're traveling all over, involved in the local church, but most of us grew up as youth pastors, worship leaders, and at a certain point, we'd been traveling all the time, and we were losing touch with the local element. And I think, there's so much we could dive into this, but there's something about, you talk about family, for example. There's a place where people aren't impressed with you and actually value you for who you are and not just your talent, your success, your
what you
name,
can bring to the table. They value you versus the offering you can give them.
Yeah, and that on a long-term sustainable thing is really important. And there's a lot of expressions of community, but I think this is true not just in the church or ministry world, but in business. We all need people that can speak the truth. Maybe it's hard, or remind us of who we are, that a place that we're known, not just for what we do. And you may be the CEO or director in your organization. Like, we have to have a place where we're known, where we can process, where people aren't impressed with us, or they're not following us based on what we can provide for them. And, in any space, you can put someone on a platform, and it's normal to be impressed with someone's talents or abilities, but all of us are human. All of us are imperfect. All of us, you get to know any of us long enough, we got our flaws, you know?
Yeah.
And it's a long answer, but I just think the local church community is a place that is harder, but create a sustainable health in individuals, in relationship. And you see this in many areas, movements. We have to have a place where we're known. And so it for us was really refreshing to, planning a church is no joke. We're a mobile church. We set up and tear down. We rent a theater every week on Sunday, and there's work and blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. But it kind of puts things in perspective. It gives you a reality of, hey, after when we first started, it was the new thing and everyone's excited, and now it's like, hey, no one's really impressed with someone. We're in this together, and yet there's deep impact. And in the church, I think the way Jesus designed the church to be is it's family, not a business. It's community, not an institution. And that's what I'm hungry for, and I think a lot of people are. And it's actually specifically related to the church world. There's a lot of disillusionment. There's a lot of people that are fed up with religion because of, I think, losing that. And
it's become, that was the big thing in the 80s, 90s, maybe even back to the 70s was, hey, if we have a CEO pastor who runs it as a business, who is operationally focused, and in that we created great programs, but we lost the connection with each other, that deep place of intimacy, that deep place of accountability, that deep place of ownership in the church, where it was, we're going to hire a whole bunch of people, they're going to run it, and you just come and get served, instead of a place where you belong and that you give back to, and that there's ownership both ways. You have staff there that pour into what's going on, but you also have a congregation or a people or a community that is pouring back into the community itself.
And there's also probably a lot of debates and discussion too, because we're not a small church.
Right.
And there's the conversation of the mega church, or even what you're describing was very much the case. And I think people discovered and saw, hey, there's some pitfalls or flaws in that. But I think deep community doesn't necessarily mean small.
Right.
It's going back to what you talked about. It's culture. And it's what is valued, what is celebrated. And that's something that I would say we're still learning. We use this phrase that you want to go from a crowd to community to family, which is a process, and it's not perfect. I don't know about your family, but my family is anything but perfect. But
I'm with you on that.
Family. It's my family, and there are things that we will do for family that, we will not for a lot of other people, coworkers, even friends, whatever, fill in the blank. And so the core is, because there's kind of this anti-institution, anti-church sentiment in a lot of some of the younger generation or different people that have had a bad taste in their mouth, which, honestly, I get it. But to me, the answer is not always just throwing everything out. It's looking at, okay, what's culture, what's value, what's success, and how are we building that? And we're on a journey trying to figure that out ourselves,
Super cool. As we wrap up this first segment, we always ask these 3 final questions. First one is, how are you finding purpose in what you do?
That's a great question. For me, purpose is connected to being faithful and obedient to what I have heard or know I'm called to do in that season. It's based more on seasons. And I'm a visionary. I like to look ahead. It's easy to get excited about new things. But
always living in the future.
Yeah, future. Yeah, on Strength Finder, futuristic. All that. But equally, the flip side of that, it's easy to feel a loss of purpose or to be discouraged because those things aren't happening yet.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really simple. But one of the ways that I stay grounded and continue to engage in the purpose in the season I'm in is, one, recognize what season am I at.
Yeah.
Like it's not an either or. I can still look ahead and dream, but right now, what's my season? Like if you're a parent and you have a young child, at some point that kid will be able to walk and you won't have to change their diapers. And in high school, there's things that you'll do, but right now your season is
being a dad, being a mom,
getting up at night, changing diapers. And that season will change, but you're going to get really frustrated and discouraged and make that season harder than it needs to be if you're wishing you were somewhere else. And so purpose is, hey, what season am I in? I'm going to be faithful, obedient, do what is in front of me really well.
Yeah.
And so often it's going back to the last thing, for me, I've heard like that God has spoken to me, or I know like, hey, this is my assignment. These are the things I'm supposed to do, steward, and do really well.
Yeah.
And at the same time, dream, but recognize like, hey, it may not be right now.
Yeah.
So that simple thing has helped me a ton because I've found myself discouraged. And then you slip into this place of, oh, what's my purpose? What am I doing? And then we want to run to something else that's exciting.
Yeah.
And it doesn't solve the problem because that will happen again. It's a cycle. And so for me, it's like, okay, what's my role? Family, in the team. What are my responsibilities? I want to do that well. And then there is a piece of us, we have to cultivate the creativity that, we're all wired differently in different ways. But to me, purpose really comes down to, and this is a whole nother topic I don't know if we want to go into, but we can't compare ourselves. We have to stay in our lane.
Yeah.
Can't compare ourselves with other people. We have to focus on where we're at and then know that, it is a season. It's not going to stay that way forever.
Yeah. So for you, what is one challenge you're currently working to overcome?
I think it's just constantly like we build off our successes and areas that we're strong in, but I think the best leaders are continually learning and growing. And so a challenge for me, and I don't think I'm the only one, is we like to lean and go back to what we know, what we've had success in, but that doesn't always translate into the next season, the next area of focus. And so currently right now we're experiencing a lot of growth and expansion in different areas. And a challenge for me is kind of defaulting to, oh, this is what I've done in the past, or this is what I would do. This is my routine. And
going into autopilot and just relying on what you've experienced and known before.
What because it's easier, it's familiar, and most of us don't like change. We all say we want to learn and grow, but when we're faced with that, often our first instinct is comfort or familiarity.
Yeah.
So for me, it's that thing of just being put in that place of I want to grow and I want to step outside of familiar, comfortable, and do the work, open up, ask other people, continue to learn so you don't get complacent or stagnant.
What's the next big dream or goal that you have right now?
Well, I just finished a big one, which was launching this podcast we released. This is for me personally. I think following that or connected to it, personally, it's doing some writing and some other projects that are continuing to build. That's on the personal side. But then for us as an organization and team, we're in a place of growth and expansion, and so there's a lot of dreams that we're looking, whether it's a new building or a new campus or there's big things happening. We're launching a school of leadership, so there's a bunch of things coming up, both on my role here and the team, and it's exciting. And then just personally, I've really worked on making space or margin to, and I didn't always do this. It's taken me a long time for this podcast, for example, to actually make it happen. But I started finding hey, I've got to create, I've got to cultivate. There's dreams and things that no one else can do for me, and I've got to set those goals. So for me, it's this podcast we just released, as well as looking at some things that we want to roll out with that and some other areas for me.
Super cool. We will be back with Zack Curry. We're going to go deeper into the podcast, talk about that. We're going to talk about creating and comparison and competing. We're going to talk about purpose and much, much more. Today's episode of Jumblethink is being brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of amazing classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills. You can take classes in everything from photography and creative writing to design, productivity, and much more. So whether you're returning to a long-time passion project, challenging yourself to get outside your comfort zone, or simply exploring something new, Skillshare has classes for you. Now, for me, one of my biggest regrets was never finishing college. But with Skillshare, I can go back and continue to learn on topics that matter to me. And this is so important to me. So join me and millions of other students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my listeners. Get 2 months free. That's right, Skillshare is offering Jumblethink listeners 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of courses for free. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/Jumblethink. Again, go to Skillshare.com/Jumblethink to start your 2 months free now. That's Skillshare.com/Jumblethink. We also want to thank our friends over at Penji. Penji helps startups, agencies, and marketing teams achieve more with unlimited graphic design support at one flat monthly rate. Their easy-to-use online platform pairs you with a professional designer and lets you create as many design projects as you want. Think of it as your monthly subscription to top-notch design. No contracts, no hourly billing, just fast, simple, and affordable graphic design for all of your needs. And as a listener of today's show on Jumblethink, you can use that code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, at Penji, PENJI.com to get 15% off your first month with Penji. Now let's jump back into today's show. We are back with Zack Curry. All right, Zack, important question. People are listening. How can they connect with Jesus Culture or with you?
Really simple. If you go to JesusCulture.com, you'll see the music side, movement, which is conferences, events, and then local church. And there's a bunch of resources and things that are connected into that. We're based out of Sacramento, so our church is every Sunday. So if you want to come hang out with us, I'm there most Sundays. But you'll get the general info, updates on things that are going on at JesusCulture.com, or obviously on social media. It's just Jesus Culture, and you get all kinds of great info.
Super cool. All right, I want to talk about Man Camp with Zack Curry. I actually was listening to that earlier today, caught most of one episode, and I listened to the entire episode with Bob Hassan. Did I say that right, Bob Hassan?
Bob Hassan, you nailed it.
He talks about identity, money, success. Super interesting conversation. Obviously, this podcast is geared towards men.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Hence man camp. Sorry, ladies.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure you can listen, you'll get something out of it, but you're not the target I'm getting. So
Yeah.
one of the things that really stood out to me as I was listening to that first episode and I was listening to the second episode was this line that you said, and I think it was in the first episode, is that the podcast that you're creating is all about men understanding what it means to be known and fully alive.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful line, but it's pretty weighty and heavy. There's a lot to unpack there. So what does it mean as a man to be known? Let's start there.
Well, just to back up a little bit, Man Camp, the podcast, originated out of two places. One, just a conversation I was having with one of my friends in my kitchen.
Yeah.
And then connected to it locally, we have what we call our men's community.
Yeah.
And we've been doing this for almost 3 years now. And this question that you're asking is something we've been diving into. And before the podcast ever started, we found out very quickly, and it's not, I don't think it's new information, but, and this is a generalization, but we found this to be very true in a lot of the men in our community, is that for the most part, for a lot of men, it's easier, the default or the trajectory is towards isolation compared to being known. And so when we say be known, becoming fully alive is one of the things we've just been going after. And I grew up in the church. To be honest, didn't like most men's groups. I thought they were boring. I didn't want to go to them because you're sitting in a room. So we try to do something different because I think there's an element in most men where like, hey, adventure. So when we say come alive, you're not, especially in the church community world, you're not just in the mundane status quo 9 to 5, like whatever that looks like. And it's not just one thing, but you're excited about life. You're alive, not just actively, your mind, your soul, your spirit. There's things that you're looking forward to.
Yeah.
And what we found is a lot of men, well, maybe, guys have a bent towards adventure. A lot of guys just aren't known because they don't want to sit in a room in a small group, read a book and like share their hearts. They actually want to be known, but the way to get there is a little different. And so
I want to pause you there because we're using this word known, but what does that really mean? Because from that standpoint, like a lot of guys will be like, yeah, they know me. We watch football on Sundays and we go to church together and we watch sports with that our kids are playing. And so they know me. They know all the things I'm doing. They know the things I have coming up, but that's not what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So go a little bit deeper there and unpack what like that really means to be known, truly known.
So for us, it means that people know your story.
Okay.
They know we and you can go even deeper into that, but most guys, like you're saying, can hang out together. You know their name, you know where they work, you know what's going on. You don't know your fears. You don't know what you're struggling with, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
We as men, generally speaking, will stuff stuff down.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? I'm great. I'm okay. When that's not actually true.
Is that being caused by, you think, internal fears, or is it being like it's just a cultural thing, or is it just, hey, people don't really want to know? Where do you think that stems from? That being detached from being known by others.
Some of it I think is it's detached from your emotions because this is again a stereotype, but for many men, emotions or showing emotion is connected to weakness. So that means we are afraid to be vulnerable because it appears like we're weak. Asking for help is a sign of weakness for many.
Yeah.
And yet the reality is we all need help. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're man, woman, child. We all need help.
Yeah.
And, there's this thing. And we started using this phrase because what we started doing was just really simple, not rocket science. I'm sure a lot of people are doing this, but we just said, hey, as guys, we just did fun things. We rented an airplane hangar for our meeting, and we always have meat. We try to have fire. We're having fun. We're just connecting, and we ask guys to do two things. One is, hey, share your story, and there's no like requirement. You can go as deep as you want. It's not a template. We just like being known as like, hey, what's your story? Where'd you come from? Where are you going?
Yeah.
We found as guys began to just share their story, like, hey, here's me, good, bad, drink, all that. Like, there was it was enabled people to be vulnerable.
Wow.
And then after, we'd have these groups of guys that would do that, and then secondly, we said, what are your dreams? Like not just what you're doing, like not your job, not your financial goals, whatever, but what are your dreams? What are the things you want to go after? We would have guys write down 50 dreams.
Wow.
It's actually a lot harder than you would think.
What would that look like when you say write down 50 dreams? What are the kind of things that would be on that list?
It's a wide range. Some are short term, some are long term, some are I want to go skydiving. Some are connected to business or financial. Like I want to. And we challenge people, dream big. I mean, they vary depending on the person. Like I want to own a couple of homes so that I can provide for my kids, for college. Like they vary, so it's hard to say. Like for me, like some dreams are like there's a guy in one of the groups I was talking to. This like I want to own a buffalo ranch. I'm like, great, that's not my dream, but I love your dream.
Yeah, I have something like that right here. I'm up to. Is it 380 dreams right now of things, and they're wide ranging, and so it's kind of a little bit like a life list or a bucket list, but it's different.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I would say there's different categories. There's personal.
Yeah.
It may be connected to your health or relationships. There's professional. There's just fun and outlandish. Like it's not a need, but this is true for anything. Like when you set a goal or you actually write it down and articulate it. Like it actually becomes a lot more real. And, for someone, it sounds like you've been doing this for a while. It gets easier as you do it. But if right now I said, hey, sit down and write out 100 dreams, it would actually take you a while.
See, the thing is that even at 50 right now, it would be hard for me to come up with 50 more.
Totally.
And I have a list of 380 right now, and a whole bunch are checked off and a whole bunch aren't. But it's not like I could just sit down and do 50 more on that list right now. And I want to pivot here a little bit, and it's a little off topic, but it's not. Have you ever seen that movie, The Italian Job?
Yeah, totally.
All right, so there's a couple guys. Not that this is the best premise, but they go rob and get a whole bunch of money. And there's this one guy who kind of like takes it all away from them that's on the team. And what's funny is when they go to that guy's house to take back what's not really theirs, but it's theirs.
Right.
They go around and they're like, that's my dream. That's my dream. That's my dream. That's the thing I wanted. And I know that in creating these lists and as doing this for a while, one of the things that you're passionate about is like, hey, your dreams are your dreams. You were mentioning that buffalo ranch. That's not your dream, but it's the other guy. But often we attach our dreams and ideas to, or our creativity or whatever we're doing to comparing to others. Well, if they're doing that, I want to do that. So in this process of creating the list, I think this is a great place to bring in that whole conversation of creating and comparison and competing with each other, especially as men. We want to win. We want to be the best. So can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah. Real quick too, just one more quick thing to close out that last question. So being known actually opened up a freedom to guys. Like the typical thing is like they're just pouring out their hearts, being real.
Wow.
There are emotions and tears and whatever, because it's like, hey, I can be me, I can be known. People know my story, they know my dreams. Something so simple, not hard to do, does take work, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it opened up this whole thing, and we saw marriages saved. We saw guys that were stuck in whatever, work, depression thing, begin to come alive, and that is expressed in different ways, and that's what started this podcast thing. So I started just interviewing people saying, hey, this is what we've been doing the last 3 years. We want guys to, we say, step out of isolation, the mundane, the status quo, be known, share your story. And as a result, there's something in your life, in your heart, that comes alive. But to step into what you're talking about, what that looks like for me or you will look different.
Well,
and that's okay.
And it shouldn't look the same because we're created differently.
We're created differently, yeah. And so there's this cycle too that, I mean, I think we make things way more complicated than we need to be. And so that's why, I mean, even in this podcast, it's so simple. Like, be known, come so that you can come alive.
Yeah.
And it's targeted towards men, obviously, but I think generally speaking for all of us, and our culture conditions us now more than ever to compare ourselves with other people.
Yeah.
Social media. I love social media. People give it it's negatives and positives, but it's not anything new. We get mad and talk about people being on their phones for too long. Well, at one point people said the same thing about people looking at a newspaper.
Yeah.
There are human conditioned things that maybe the device, the outlet has changed, but the condition in us as humans has not.
Yeah.
But very specifically, we are conditioned to compare ourselves.
Right.
And so there's this cycle that happens is we compare, we look around, and what happens is it naturally leads us to then copy other people.
Wow.
So we see this is working for them. This could be in any area, business, personally, dreams, work, wherever. Oh, that's working for them. I want purpose. I want to be known, or whatever it is that we're putting value on. So I'm going to do the same thing that person's doing because I want the same results.
Right.
So we compare, now we're copying, and then it naturally moves us to a place where we're competing with everyone around us because we're all copying, doing the same thing, trying to, and there's only so much, whatever, platform, recognition, space in whatever area you're working in. And so now we find ourselves competing against other people when I think it should actually be much different. And it would look like this. Instead of comparing, we're cultivating something.
Okay.
So I can, thank goodness Thomas Edison or inventors, people that we're inspired by, they often were the oddballs out. They were doing something different, but what they were doing was cultivating an idea, a dream, a thought connected to failure. But when you can't compare and cultivate at the same time. So you begin to cultivate something, and that means you can't look around. You just got to be, I'm going to do what is in front of me, what only I can do.
Yeah.
If you begin to cultivate, then you create something instead of copying.
Yeah.
And that's the tragedy, in the church, and it's not limited to the church, but we talk about this a lot. We want to impact culture. We want to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And everybody's doing the same thing. It's like, well, we're just all copying each other. We're not, what we say we want to do is not being matched by our actions.
Yeah.
So if we're just copying, there's good things to copy, and there's to a certain degree, nothing wrong with that. But if we're saying our end result is impact, purpose, cultural change, whatever it is, you can't copy and get that. You have to create something.
Yeah.
So you cultivate, you create, and then when you have something you've created, you contribute it, you give it away.
Yeah.
And so instead of competing, you're contributing something. Instead of copying, you're creating something. Instead of comparing, you're cultivating what only you can do. And I don't think you can do both. And so you have to make a choice. And again, the people that I admire most, the people that everyone ends up copying, are the people that do the opposite.
Yeah.
and so
they're just out on their own doing what they do, keeping focused on where they're going and not really paying attention.
Yeah. And so that, I just think comparison is such a trap. It's a spiral down, and we wonder why, like, I just never feel like I'm getting the break I want or doing enough, because we're just looking around and we're looking at our feed and we're getting discouraged because, that person's got this and that. It's like, well, hey, stop. Like, cultivate something.
Yeah.
What is it that you can only do? And then that leads you to creating something.
Well, and I know for me, the first year of this podcast was like that. I looked and I said, oh, look at their success. They did this and they're getting this many listens, this many downloads. They're getting this outcome. Why didn't I achieve that level? And part of it is that you don't know the other person's story. And so you're trying to emulate a solution, an end result without knowing the full picture.
Yeah, and also we're doing it in a timeline that's skewed. So we're just starting, and we're comparing ourselves to someone that's been in, you start 1 month in, and we're like, why am I not getting the same results as someone that's 5 years in? And we're discouraged, we're frustrated, we're like, well, just like you're saying, there's a 5-year history of before all the successes that everyone sees, of failures and trial and error. And most of us give up because we're not, where we want to be, or we get frustrated, discouraged, and we get stuck. And it's like, wait a second, you're a month in.
Yeah.
Like trial and error,
Yeah. So you talk about cultivating and also contributing. And you mentioned a couple times in what you were sharing about the problem of failure and the problem of not getting the outcomes that you want. How do we navigate that, especially in a place of from a believer standpoint who has a relationship with God, and they're feeling like they're stepping into what God's created them to do, and yet the outcome doesn't align to what they feel like is going to happen. Maybe it's the expectation of a word given to them or something like that, and they navigate this failure and they go, well, the dream must not be valid, or it must not be for me because I'm not seeing the breakthrough I expect. And so they have this failure, they have this fear, they have this disappointment. How do you navigate that when you're processing this? Because I think you're right on about that comparison versus and competing against cultivating and creating. But how do we navigate that when things don't go the way that we want in that purpose of chasing dreams and ideas?
I think failure has way more to do with revealing what's inside of us than actually being the end-all measure of we're a failure. To me, I mean, I don't know who said this, but I love this quote that circumstances don't make or break you, they reveal you.
Wow.
And connected to that question, or even the topic of failure, I think failure actually is revealing something. And so what we often do, we're afraid of it because we don't want to be rejected, or we don't want to look poorly in whoever's opinion, or but really, and I spoke on this topic a little bit, like failure is actually giving up or stopping.
Wow.
And there's like a whole list. I mean, you would know probably most of these stories. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, and then, came back, had this whole journey.
Yeah.
Walt Disney was actually fired early on for his lack of imagination.
Yeah.
Oprah Winfrey was told she wasn't fit for television. So many people that we have put on a pedestal of, wow, I want to be that, and I'm failing, I'm not there. It's actually the failure, or what people will call failure, that actually triggered them to step into the very thing that they were created, passionate, destined to do.
Yeah.
But failure was a test of, am I going to give up? Am I going to let the voice of what other people are trying to determine or say over me be the final word, or even what I say over myself, that I don't have what it takes, I can't do it? Or am I going to, in the midst of that, go back to, hey, God, you said this, or I'm not going to give up. I'm going to grow. I'm going to learn. I'm going to keep going. And honestly, I think failure is one of the best instructors in our journey.
Wow.
If we allow it to teach us, versus make it be the final word that we shut down, close, we often run away from.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to fail, because we don't want to look weak. We don't want to look like we don't have it together.
Wow.
But our failures, our pain, our disappointments are often the greatest platform to actually give something to someone else, because all of us have failure. All of us don't get it right the first time. But if you keep going, you'll learn, and hopefully you won't do it again. And, I think I've had amazing mentors in my life, but some of the best mentors have also been people that did it poorly and wrong, and I learned just as much from them. And if you don't get bitter, you can be like, hey, I can, as a leader, grow and not do that just as much as you can learn from someone that's like, oh, I wanted to do that.
As we move towards the end of this segment, I want to leave people with some actionable items. You mentioned about that you've been doing this for 3 years, and that the podcast is birthed out of this 3-year I wouldn't want to call it an experiment, but it's kind of an experiment of learning to evolve into what we're created to be as men. So in that sense of experimenting to learn and grow how we do community, how we become known, how we become fully alive, so many people in our culture, not limited to just men, but especially men, are playing it safe. They're living lives that they're told that that's the way they should live by culture, that they're buying into dreams and destinies that really aren't their own, that they say this is mark of success. And they are playing it safe, or they're playing it the known way, and yet they're unfulfilled. They don't have real purpose and substance to what they're doing. So what are some steps they can take right now if they're listening and they're going, you know, this conversation is really resonating with me. I've been doing this for a long time, they say, and I'm in a career that I hate, or my marriage is really struggling, or my family situation. What are the things that they can do to really say, let me get back to the place I find my identity, find my created purpose from God, and really step into that fullness of not playing it safe, going the unconventional way, and really stepping into the purpose that they were designed for?
I mean, I think really simply, you just have to let some trusted friends in to your journey and into your process and story, no matter where it's at. If you feel stuck, if you are succeeding to a certain degree, you don't. It doesn't have to be everything's falling apart. Like let people in, you know, and they need to be trusted, but let them walk, be known is what we say. Just, hey, be known. What, you know, so that looks differently, but it comes down to relationship. You have to be known. And I think specifically for guys, for some it's easier, for most it's harder. But just let people in, share your story, be known. And then to really look at this thing of, hey, begin to dream. And really practically, like we tell guys, like, hey, when's the last time you went on an adventure? When's the last time you did something outside of what was expected, or, you know, was fun? Because, you know, I mean, this is just if you study or read about creativity, you need margin, you need space. And, you know, everyone's different. Some guy may want to ride a motorcycle. Some guy may want to go backpacking, or, you know, like, it's not a one size fits all, but what are you looking forward to? Are you looking forward to something? I ask people this question all the time. If you don't have something you're looking forward to, that's a big clue. Like, that's something you can take a basic, easy step towards that. It doesn't have to be, you have to climb Mount Everest, you know, like just start with, like, hey, what are you looking forward to? If you're not looking forward to anything, then
something's not right.
Yeah, something's off. And, you know, we all have roles at work, family, parents, wherever it is. But if you're not taking care of your own heart, one of the people I got to interview on the podcast was John Eldredge. Love, one of my favorite authors. He wrote several books that I mean, he impacted me when I was in high school, college, but one of the most well-known books he wrote was Wild at Heart. And he just talks about, like, hey, you've got to take care of your heart. Your soul is your mind, your will, your emotions. This impacts us more than we realize, and you can't ignore it. You can't numb it. And that's what we do a lot of times. And there's vices and things, some acceptable, some not. You know, so, but either way, they're all destructive if we're numbing pain, disappointment, failure, these things, instead of really, hey, I want to be known, I'm going to dream, and I'm going to take some steps to just be alive, you know? And some of us know, oh yeah, I need to do that. Some of us need help, and that's why we need people to be with us. And we get strength, we get courage from the encouragement and other people that are in our lives, reminding us of who we really are. 'Cause some of us we're our own worst critics, and we're just beating ourselves up, never there. And I've got people in my life that say, hey, no, Zach, this is who you are. Don't forget. And maybe you're blowing it here, and you got some work to do, but don't forget who you are. And we need that. And I don't want to minimize struggles that people are facing, whatever, but at the same time, sometimes we make it way too complicated. And there are long, deep patterns. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a counselor, but we've lived in a world where we've stuffed some things, we've isolated, we've numbed ourselves, and we wonder why we don't feel alive, we don't feel like we have purpose. And there's some easy steps to begin to move in the right direction.
Yeah, super, super good. We'll be back with Zack to do rapid fire questions. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at opportunityinchina.com. Have you been looking for a way to change your career or social prospects? Do you see the world around you changing and haven't quite figured out what path you should take? You are not alone in seeking opportunity. Visit opportunityinchina.com for access to scholarships to attend university in China. Or, if you have a bachelor's degree already, opportunityinchina.com provides access to jobs in the educational sector all across China. Now, working in China is not only often well paid, but it will place you among 1/5 of the world's population, boosting your social network, bringing you more deeply into the story of globalization, and opening up doors you never knew existed. Seize your opportunity now. Visit their website for more information at opportunityinchina.com. Whether you're a new listener or longtime fan, if we haven't connected, we'd love to do this journey of chasing dreams and ideas with you. Super easy to do. Head on over to jumblethink.com. You'll find links to all of our social media channels like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and you can join our newsletter. So head on over, jumblethink.com. Let's connect and let's dream and turn those dreams into reality together. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions with Zack Curry. We are back with Zack Curry. All right, Zack, as we wrap up today's show, we always do rapid fire questions. So are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it. Bring it.
So as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Professional soccer player.
I knew that about you, actually. I remember that. That's one thing I remember from Chico days was you were always going to indoor or outdoor soccer to play somewhere.
Always. Now I do that with my daughters. They all play. So
Nice, nice. What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Set practical small goals. Do something with what you already have. Maybe it's not the end goal, but do something now.
What's a big lie about the church that you want to break?
I would say for the church, the lie is that we have this expectation that it's supposed to be perfect. And I think the reason the church exists is because we aren't perfect.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus came to do for us. And so I think there's a lot. I'm not making any excuses for things and wrongs that people do, but because a person does something wrong, it doesn't mean the church is wrong. The idea and the concept, the mission of the church is for imperfect people, is for broken people, is so that people that don't have it together can encounter God who helps us, and he's the one that transforms us. And so I think we're surprised, like, oh my gosh, we love the scandal of it, and every time we're surprised. And to me, I'm not. It's human nature has weakness, fault, and that is why we have the church, what Jesus came to do for us.
What is one change you'd like to see in the world?
Oh gosh, the first thing that comes to mind is that we would respond instead of react. I think wars, politics, especially. It's actually in America. The beautiful thing is we don't all have to agree, but I think one of the dangers right now is that we can't even have conversations because we're constantly reacting to people. And the difference between reacting and responding is reacting often is emotional, there isn't a goal to connect or to be heard and hear other people, and responding is intentional. And I think if we would just slow down and respond to things, it would make a lot of the really complicated trigger point issues, like in politics, but obviously beyond that, get to solutions versus creating these walls, offenses, and divisions. And that's what I'd say, I think.
What do you want your legacy to be?
This is a long answer, but I'll make it short in the sense. My legacy for me, or success for me, recently is not based on me. It's my kids or people that I can invest in and seeing them succeed beyond me. And so I want to be known as someone that created a platform that I want to be relevant so that I have something to give away to other people so they could go further than I ever could. And that's been so freeing for me, because instead of a measure of, I got to get here, it's like, no, I'm going to hustle. I'm going to stay in the game because I want to be relevant. My dream is that my daughters will come to me and say, Dad, you're still in the game. You're relevant, whatever it is you're doing, and ask me a question, and I can help them and give them something that will help them go further than I ever could. So to me, legacy and success is in people, family, pouring into other leaders beyond myself.
Where do you find inspiration?
I find inspiration in nature. I love going to the mountains, especially. I'm more of a mountain guy. My wife's a beach person, but either way, I personally feel so close to God in nature, in the mountains. I'm inspired. I get ideas about anything, personally, professionally. It just, when you look at that natural beauty, it just rejuvenates, refreshes my soul, and I get inspired in ideas. So as much as I can, I try to just get into nature.
Super cool. What is one book you think every dreamer or entrepreneur should read, and why?
I'm going to cheat here and not give you one book, but I'll give you a category of books. I think dreamers, entrepreneurs can learn a lot from all different books, but the biographies of people, specifically in the space that you're going after,
that's good. Yeah,
is one of the greatest inspirations. So for me, I love reading books about, obviously I'm in the ministry church world of, I've read Billy Graham's autobiography or, Martin Luther King, and you read about significant people, some known or unknown, and you learn from their journey, and there's principles that, one, inspire, two, I think give context, and then hope. And so I would say read stories about people that you want to be like, or in the space that you're going after, because history has shown itself that we don't learn from history. Where we're at, while maybe technology is new and there's new ways that whatever we can do differently, better, faster, there's a cycle in biz, any space. Like we can learn a lot from the past as we step into the future.
This next question comes from a mutual friend of ours. You may know who he is. You may pick up on the question. I won't mention names, but he wants to know who your favorite employee is.
My favorite employee. This is Daniel now, probably, huh? Gosh.
You don't have to answer that.
No comment.
No comment. What's one thing you're currently excited about?
I am excited about Man Camp Podcast because it's it sounds selfish, but to me, it's way bigger. It is an experiment. You mentioned this earlier. And to me, it's a marker and a milestone of taking an idea and seeing something become a reality.
That's cool.
So for me, like, the success has less to do with how many people listen. Obviously, I hope it impacts, encourages, inspires people. But for me, like, I didn't do it for a long time, even going back to our conversation, because I was that fear of failure. Like, is it not going to go well? Like, and so I procrastinated or I took longer than I needed to. And so for me, it's just this thing of like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. And to me, that's success. And I hope it has an impact, but that's one thing that I'm really excited about, because now for me, it's a building block of some other things that I want to go after and do. And on top of that, I'm really excited about soccer. I love watching my girls. I love being a part of them stepping into that, where for me as a dad, a coach, I get to walk with them, and I love that.
Super cool. Our final rapid fire question: what is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
It's I mentioned this earlier. Like, I want to write some books. So I've got a few ideas in the hopper, and I'm building off the momentum. And I don't know. I think no one wants to just be share dead air or whatever, but like I would love to inspire, encourage with anything I have. So that's a big one. And then ultimately, like, I want to just be a really good dad. That's a huge goal for me.
Yeah.
Like dream that never stops.
Yeah. As we wrap up today's show, we always like to leave our guests have a final thought. What's your final thought for all of us listening today?
Whatever you're doing, wherever you're at in your process, specifically connected to dreams or your journey, I love this phrase. Some friends of mine when I was really young, just going into college, we said that the journey is just as important as the destination.
Oh yeah.
And process. So the process that we're in, while frustrating sometimes, slower than we want it to be, the process is where we're formed. It's where we actually develop something to give away.
Wow.
And yet it's the thing that we all want to skip or get out of as fast as possible.
Wow.
We're always looking I want to be at this point. And then we all find very quickly, once you get there, it doesn't stop or satisfy. And so then we don't give as much value as I think is needed for the process or the journey that we're in. So I would just say to everyone listening, whatever, maybe you're a mom, a dad, entrepreneur, you're in the ministry space, artist, whatever, fill in the blank. Where you're at, good, bad, frustrating, you're in a process. Yeah. Embrace the process, because we can make things longer than they need to be because we resist. And if we just engage in that, we actually discover the very thing often that we're looking for.
Super cool. Zack, thanks so much for taking time out, sharing some of the story behind Jesus culture, and definitely sharing all about Man Camp and then purpose. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on the podcast. So great to connect with you again, Michael. It's been a long time, but love what you're doing. Super fun. And all the best to you and your family.
We want to thank Zack for taking time out to be on the show today. You can check them out at jesusculture.com. And we want to thank our sponsors for today's show, Penji. They offer unlimited graphic design at a low monthly subscription. Head on over to penji.com. Use that code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, to get 15% off your first month. We also want to thank our friends over at Skillshare. They have great online courses, and they're giving 2 months away for free for just being our listeners. So head on over to skillshare.com/jumblethink. We also want to thank our friends over at opportunityinchina.com. They provide amazing opportunities for learning and teaching abroad. Head on over to opportunityinchina.com to check out what they are doing. Well, that does it for today's show. Now get out there, chase those dreams and ideas, and change the world around you.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps. Vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.